my buddy had told me, oh, you should watch this show. It's called Alone. It's pretty interesting. And I think at that time, season 2 was about to come out. So I went and watched the show. And like I said, it was a fascinating idea for a show. They take 10 people and give them each 10 basic items like a ferro rod and a sleeping bag. Some pretty simple stuff. Put each person of those 10 people by themselves out in the woods. They self-film and you have a tap out button and it's basically the person that lasts the longest wins. And so pretty fascinating idea for a show. And like I said, I watched it and I enjoyed it. And I also thought, well, why aren't they hunting bears? Of course, there's when you get on the show, you realize there's certain regulations and that certain seasons had to follow and stuff. So that said, as you're watching it, you're exactly like, what an idiot. No, but so I signed up for it on a whim that evening and then sent off. It was a real basic sign up. I think I sent them a link to my YouTube videos with living with the reindeer herders in Siberia and stuff. And sent it off and forgot about it. And it wasn't until 3 years later they randomly reached out. Really? So I was working up on a construction job in DC and building this driveway, and I got a call, and this is the History Channel. Every time I was like, oh gosh, I forgot about that. And I was like, man, they said, just so you know, you're one of the only people, all of us, all the producers agree with one on the show if you say yes. And so I was like, oh, geez, oh, man, I got to go catch up on the show. And so, of course, as the doors kept opening, I just kept going through them. And obviously, having lived a life, I think that was interesting for them prior, made for good TV. Been to Siberia, done all this, that, had a little family. So it was good. It fit their mold. Yeah. And then I found myself all of a sudden that helicopter was taking off and you're like, holy cow, this is happening.
Yeah, where'd they drop you? Where was this?
It was northern Canada. Great Slave Lake is where it was called. So it was in Northwest Territories. Yeah. And it was really neat location. It was very remote. The whole time I was out there, I never saw a non-production related vehicle or boat or anything like that.
Yeah, so it's not like they're there filming you like Survivor.
No, right. You get your own, you get your GoPros and your camera, and they spend a week on orientation teaching you how to film yourself, and then they drill it in all the time. You should always be filming. If they go, they'll come do a medical check every so often, 10 days or so, and if they take your footage, and if they'll come back at the next medical check and be like, hey, we noticed you weren't filming during this or that. So they really want you to be filming all the time, which you end up doing because you're bored out there. Else are you gonna do? Yeah. so anyway, I found myself out there and went from there.
Could you imagine that much footage to sift through? Alex here, who's in the room. Yeah, Alex Felice here.
Yeah, what a
it's
nightmare.
Just hundreds and hundreds of hours of just
people blabbing on about
it. Yeah, how would you find
spoons?
Oh, wild. Okay, so you get on this show, and I mean, you said earlier it was easy. Did you? I mean, was it like that from day one? Like,
it was. That's a loaded question because it could have really not been easy.
Sure.
For one, like your success in a wilderness situation is never guaranteed.
Yep.
Or in business, or it's never guaranteed. Like we were talking about a minute ago, you just do everything you can to try to set up where success is more likely. And so I was stressed the whole time. I was like, oh man, if I don't get food today, then tomorrow I'm going to starve, you know? And so they dropped me off on the helicopter, and immediately you're already like, well, if I don't get food by my next meal time, I'm already starving. So the pressure's on immediately. And so the helicopter flew away. I got my bow, and I thought, well, right now it's probably when nature knows that I'm not here, so I'm going to hike around with my bow. And sure enough, saw a rabbit, shot it. And and again, you could say, well, lucky, but of course that requires that you'd been practiced with your bow and didn't miss at your opportunity. And, I did. So I was lucky and got a rabbit on day one and then started to move. I assessed my location and realized that the only thing I could see was well, there might be moose in here, but I wasn't seeing other sign, no berries, which I was expecting. And so I It's like, well, and if I'm going to be hunting moose is my most likely option, I'm going to have to move my shelter to where I'm not in their trail or not near the wind's not blowing the wrong direction. So I was in the process that first day of moving my shelter, and I saw another rabbit run by, and I was like, ooh. So I went and moved my shelter, set some snares there, and the next day I came out and I caught a couple rabbits in those snares, and I was like, well, I wasn't thinking about rabbits, but I guess that's the way to go. So kind of just adapting to what was on offer there, and really started leaning into those. And then, but rabbits don't sustain you. They're just that it fills your gut, but there's too much protein in them and not enough fat, so your body can't actually process it. So I think I was losing weight as fast as someone that was not eating anything, but I was catching rabbit after rabbit after rabbit. Yeah. But that whole time I was stressed. I was like, oh man, I'm going to starve tomorrow. And then it was on day 21, I believe, that I finally managed to get a moose, which was an incredible
I'd love to know that story.
And we'll talk about that. But even then, I never felt like the pressure was off. It was almost something I learned in hindsight after the show, which was to live a little more in the present, because I bared a lot of stress of a potential future that never ended up coming to fruition. You know what I mean? I thought, oh, I shot this moose, but somebody else probably got a moose, and the Wolverine stole my fat, so now I'm losing again. So now I got to make up for that. And then am I going to be okay missing my family for like up to a year out here? How's this all going to play out? It's, it's a bummer. I'm going to have to miss Christmas with the kids and, stuff. Yeah. You start thinking about all these future things. Of course, I shot a moose. I had all this fish. I was still worried about starving because I'm going to eat this at some point. And so I just bore all this stress. And then one day the show ended and I was like, huh? Like, oh, wow, incredible. But in hindsight, it was like, geez, I could have just enjoyed the whole time. Like, I didn't even have to stress, but I won't deny that I wasn't like stressed the whole time, which is interesting. And in hindsight, like if I would have done it again, you know what? You do your best every day. You try to confront your problems as they come, and you don't have to dwell in that worry about the future. You just accept it as much as it helps you to motivate you to take action against it. But
in a very, very horrible, a horrible analogy here, I'm going to use very first world problems. I made a YouTube video recently, or an Instagram post with Alex here, about cleaning my pool. All right, so I get all these leaves in the pool and they're covering. I look like such an idiot right now. I'm going to just say the story though.
Sounds nice.
Right, so I'm cleaning the pool, right? And there's like leaves falling in. As I go from one side of the pool to the other, and I'm cleaning it, and I get all the leaves up, and I look back at where I started, and it's full of leaves again, and I'm like getting irritated and stressed that like that I can't clean the pool good enough. And I go back and I clean it again. I'm like, oh, I just want to get all these leaves. And then I just had the realization. I'm like, well, maybe I just need to enjoy the process of cleaning the pool. Like, right? Maybe I just need to not be stressed. Like, what if I just took the problems as they come?
That's actually great. Right? I'm the type of person that like am in a hurry a lot.
Yeah, like I got to accomplish. I got to knock this out. I got to get to the next thing. And in life, I do that all the time. It's like, right? I set some goal, go for it. And then, okay, well, now what's next? Right. I got to have more stress in my life.
Yeah, dwell in the process. Like I sometimes I'll do that when I'm hiking, taking people out, and we're going to get to this lake, and you're like, wait, we're already there. Just so you know, like we're in the woods, it's beautiful. Yep. Like, take a breath.
I think that with my kids sometimes, right? I'm just like, I got to remember, it's like my son Wilder is 3.5, and he's struggling with talking, and I'm always like trying to like help him talk, and I'm like, but it's like, he's not going to be 18 and struggling to talk. Like, he's going to figure it out. I can fully try to enjoy this moment with my kid and not feel like
pressure.
The pressure to get him in the schooling system. Like, I don't know if you've dealt with that, but the schooling system, like we homeschool right now. And one of the reasons why is because I just don't want to deal with that like pressure of
he's behind.
He's behind. We have a tutor that once a week, my daughter goes for an hour with this tutor, just for mostly for interaction with another friend. And the tutor mentioned recently, like, well, Rosie's, really good in this, and this, but she's just a little behind on this one area. And it stressed my wife and I out. Like all of a sudden it was, now we're comparing to other our kids, right?
Yeah, totally.
I'm like, oh, we
totally.
better sit down and double up on her math or whatever the thing was.
Yeah,
And-
I guess that's good about homeschooling. You can maybe lean into her strengths
Yeah.
as their strengths, and the other things will catch up to you
Yeah.
over time. But
yeah, and we do it to our kids, but we probably do it to ourselves just
sure we
as much.
do.
right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, oh, all these things are great in my life, but I got a little bit of fat on my love handles here. I'm such a loser. Like,
there you go,
yeah,
gratitude, right?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have to be thankful for what you have, and then work on what you need to work on.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Yeah. You know, it reminds me. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, there was a thing you said earlier about you thought there were going to be bears out there. You thought there were going to be berries out there. You thought the fish would maybe come easier. And you get out there, like you have this plan, it doesn't work. And it reminds me of two quotes that I love. Number one is Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Right.
I love that. And then Eisenhower said, plans are worthless, but planning is everything.
Yeah. Right.
So I see that in
good
your,
one.
yeah, right? Yeah, you still need to have a plan, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it
you
doesn't always
do.
go that way.
You have a plan, you get it all set up, and sometimes it works. But if in life you've often dwelled on the edge of aptitude, as we talked about earlier, then you actually become more comfortable in that space, so that when the plans don't work, you're less uncomfortable with relying on your ability to adapt or confront these unforeseen circumstances. So, I think
Yeah, that's good, man.
leaning into that's okay.
That's good. All right, so you get this moose. Like how do you get a moose with a bow and arrow? Like, I mean,
Yeah, I was intense. I was what a blast. I spent a lot of times like sitting on the, up in the berries, just picking berries, filling all my pockets and calling moose. Like, they make this sound. And so I just sit there and call moose, and
just with your
did
voice.
it for days, just with your voice. The nice thing about moose, you don't need anything special. You can just
You know what it sounds like.
Yeah. Okay. You make this sound, and then as I was out there, I noticed generally I would call, and any interaction I had would pretty much be the next day. Like, it actually took them a really long. They'd hear it from miles away and dink their way over slowly, get there the next morning.
And I'm sure they were pretty disappointed. Thought you were a female moose.
Yeah.
you are not.
Most of them were pretty disappointed, I think. I'm not a very attractive moose.
Yep.
But yeah, so I'd done a lot of that. Done, like you said, always situated in my shelter. I'd spent nights trying to stay up go nocturnal, stay up all night and try to get one at night. They're more active then. And then I missed the moose like we discussed earlier. And then I had, tracked them, realized there was an area that wasn't very narrow, but it's a pretty flat terrain up there. And there were like two hills, and between them, it wasn't too far of a distance. And I noticed when I missed that moose that it ran through that area, and I saw a bunch of other trails in that area. And I was like, well, I know they go through here, but good luck guessing what trail they're going to come through and being at the right place at the right time. So to increase my odds of getting lucky, I actually thought back to living with the natives, and we had built with the natives, like I talk about how they kind of followed the reindeer, but the reindeer kind of followed them. One of the ways they managed where the reindeer go is they build these giant 30-kilometer circumference fences just with no nails, just interlocking logs, like kind of, and so we just chop and build like for months at a time, these big fences, and they'd push them in there, move them out, kind of manage them like that. And I thought, man, I remember on those fences, they used to build these spots where moose could come into the fence but not come back out. And so I started thinking about funneling fences and moose like that. And I was like, oh, I could actually build a fence between here. But then I thought, oh my gosh, what a calorie expenditure. When I'm on a low calorie diet, that seems stupid. And then I was like, well, I'm not here to starve. I'm here to either make it happen or not. Like I'm okay with failing. You have to be okay with that. So I was like, well, I'll put the energy into doing it. And I built this whole fence, and you cross your fingers.
Yeah.
and then
that could have gone the other way.
It could have not worked. Could have just built a fence like an idiot out there.
That's funny.
What's a moron doing?
Every great entrepreneur, though, that I can think of, like really big ones, right? The Richard Bransons, the Elon Musks, like the big, every one of them, their stories, their biographies, they have those examples of, look, this may have gone the other way. So in a way, it's almost like success is just a survivor bias kind of a situation.
Yeah, there is a lot of that, I would imagine. And you might look at a lot of people on that show and be like, what an idiot, just because it didn't actually work.
It didn't
but
work.
It might have been, they were trying though. It's good.
It reminds me of the, what's that, I'm not a huge football guy, but years ago there was this. I think it was it the Super Bowl or going into the Super Bowl? I want to butcher this. The Seattle Seahawks.
Oh,
Russell
yeah.
Wilson, right?
Yeah.
At the last
Hail
play
Mary from the 1 yard
Yeah,
line.
exactly. And it gets like, intercepted, right? And everyone's
Totally.
like, "What a moron! What an
Right,
idiot!" But in
right.
reality, it was actually the right play. Like
Right.
mathematically, percentage-wise, it should have worked
Right.
more than what the alternative was. Anyway. And,
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I think.
When it works.
Annie Duke talks about this, and I think Thinking in Bets, and maybe she's got another book where she talks more about that. But yeah, this idea. Sometimes you just make the best judgment call you can,
Yeah.
and sometimes it goes your way, and sometimes doesn't. But
Yeah.
over the long run, this goes back to the Mark Cuban quote, right? You only have to be right once.
Yeah,
so if you
yeah.
continually operate in that mindset of what I call, well, a lot of people call, I didn't make this up, but an asymmetric bet, right?
Yeah.
Like where the upside is a lot higher than the downside.
Yeah.
So like, and if you just make those bets in your life over and over, sometimes they don't pan out because they don't always, they're bets.
Right,
But sometimes
right.
they do, and you get the moose.
Exactly. And I was out snaring rabbits one day, and I also had set up these tin cans with like string on the moose trails so I
yeah.
could hear them go clank when they walk
Yep.
by. Which almost is why I got that first moose that I missed, as it came through one of my clanks and I heard it and went out. Anyway, so that was a one iteration on this. But then I had combined those solutions, a fence and these clanking cans, and I was out snaring rabbits. I actually had a rabbit in the snare, and then I just heard clank. I was like, oh my gosh. And then, like, no kidding. So something's coming along the trail. So I just ran over to the bush that was next to the funnel. And sure enough, the moose comes lumbering up. And I took my shot. It was like 24 yards or something. And it felt really good. I was like, holy smokes. Like, I think I just nailed that moose. And then, and then it took off running. And if you've ever bow hunted, you've also lost animals before. So like you've got one, you think it's really a good shot, and you never find it. And so one of the keys to prevent that is to wait like an hour before you go look for it. And so I just waited like the longest. I skinned that rabbit, like trying to waste time. And then finally I went and, started tracking the moose. I saw some bubbly blood. I probably got it in the lung. It was exciting. And then all of a sudden the blood dried up, the tracks were gone, and you're just like, oh, no way, I'm gonna lose this thing. And anyway, long story short, it was the most like emotional up and down day I can even remember. It was just like, I got a moose. Oh, I lost the moose. Oh no, I found the moose. This is crazy. And then, but it's not dead. Oh no. So then I just had to wait. I got close to it, like about 60 yards. But it was still just like moving its head around. It didn't know what happened. It had just gotten shot.
Yeah.
Went and laid down. And in that situation, they'll usually just bleed out. Or if you like spook them, they'll know they're being chased, and they'll like jump up and take off. And by then they've clotted up, and you might never find that animal again, which would be the worst situation. You killed an animal and didn't recover it. So I just waited, and it was a very long 3 hours. And it was like, it would stand up, and you're just like, no, don't run away. And then it would lay down. You're like, yes. And it would stand up and lay down. And it was rough. I couldn't really finish it off without risking like having it run off and it'd be a disaster. So I just had to wait and hope that it would end quickly. And then finally it stood up and shook and fell over. And I was like, I'm pretty sure it's dead.
Yeah.
And I walked up and touched it, and it was dead. And like, talk about the gratitude, and talk about like burden. I had this burden of this like demon on my shoulder. You're going to starve. And it just felt like, oh, finally free of that thing. And full joy there.
Yeah.
And